Building strength is more than just lifting heavy all the time. In fact, I find a lot of people underestimate the science of strength training. They think that they can just walk into the gym, pick a movement, slap tons of weight on, max out, and call it a day, right? That's not going to build strength. Building strength is very difficult, but the good news is that it's very simple, okay? There are principles, there are rules, and if we follow them, we'll probably get stronger without getting hurt. And we'll be able to do that over a long period of time, meaning we can sustainably create consistent progress, which is amazing, okay? So this video is about the 5 major rules of strength training that I've found can be applied to pretty much anyone and everyone at any stage of the game. We're gonna talk about rule number 1 in a second, but first I just wanna let you know that my one-to-one coaching is available. I have opened up some more seats. I'm not looking to take on tons and tons of people. I'm trying to be selective. I wanna work with people who are committed, who are disciplined. And if you are here taking the time to watch this, you're probably one of those people. So I just want to extend that invitation to you. You can find the application in the description, all right? If you apply, we'll get on a call. I'd love to hear more about what your situation is and how I can help. Okay, so rule number 1 is exposure. To keep things short, sweet, and simple, all I mean here is if you want to lift heavy, you have to train heavy. If you want to get good at lifting heavier and heavier weights, you have to practice lifting heavier and heavier weights, okay? There's certain adaptations that occur here, and all of them are important. There's 2 in particular that we're going to talk about, but the reason why we need to expose ourselves to heavier and heavier loads is because your body adapts to stimuli. You have to give your body a reason to get stronger, all right? Think about this in very basic, like human terms, right? We have this awesome survival mechanism where we adapt to things. Adaptation is just a part of being human, and it's a beautiful thing. It's how we've lasted on this earth for thousands of years, right? How we've survived for thousands of years. Here's the trick. You need to present the right stimulus in order to elicit the quote-unquote right adaptation. And the basic example I'll give you is if I want to get really good at running marathons, but I start lifting heavier weights and not really running much, am I going to elicit the adaptation I want? Probably not. But if I want to get better at lifting heavier weights, so I start lifting heavier weights, am I going to elicit the adaptation I want? Yeah, probably, or at least a better adaptation, an adaptation closer to what I want than if I were to go to run marathons or run tons of miles in order to get better at lifting heavier weights. So hopefully you're sticking with me here, but that's a basic example, okay? So the stimuli we present to our body really, really matters, and that's why we need to expose ourselves to heavier loads. Now, what do I mean by this? There's a muscular and a neural adaptation. The muscular is very obvious. We need our muscles to get stronger. We need our muscles to get bigger so they can literally handle the loads that we're asking it to lift. But the second piece here is a neural adaptation. This is very simple. Some people overcomplicate this. Do we know a ton about the central nervous system when it comes to this stuff? No, not necessarily, but we know enough to know that your CNS matters a lot. And it takes time to teach and train your CNS to be able to, handle or lift or execute a particular movement with X amount of load on your back. To put it simply. And the example I'm gonna give here, which I'm hoping this is relatively accurate, the example I'm gonna give here is a woman whose child is stuck under a car and she somehow summons the strength to lift it up, right? That's her central nervous system tapping into her entire resource, right? Her body as a resource. Normally she wouldn't be able to do that, but because of adrenaline and because of all these other things, she's now able to tap into that. As a strength athlete, your job is to get better and better at tapping into that because you have all this muscle mass, you have all this tissue, but now you've got to be able to access it and use it, right? And so that's why we need to train the neural aspect of it. In fact, a lot of real strength training, like strength expression, is the central nervous system adapting, just getting better and better at handling heavier and heavier loads. And to continue on, this kind of combines 2 specific features of strength, which is skill, so really technique, and then your muscle and your CNS, so your body, right? Now, skill itself, this is another reason why we want to expose ourselves to heavier and heavier loads, because strength is a skill. Strength is specific. What do you want to be strong in? Well, let's use the back squat, for example. Okay, I want to be good at squats. Well, squats require technique. It's a bar that's on your back, right? There's going to be a specific bar path that's going to be more efficient than other bar paths, right? So we need to practice that. And as you get heavier and heavier, your technique might need to change because how your body is able to lift that weight may change. Like your ability to do that in the way that you do it might change as the weight gets heavier, right? Because when the weight's super light, you might be able to bully it, right? It's not going to take you out of position. And if it does, you can fight it. But when it's a 1RM or a PR, like you may not be able to recover from that bar taking you out of position, from that weight taking you out of position, right? So my point is exposure is necessary because it allows us to practice the skill and allows us to build strength, which again is this adaptation we're looking for with our muscle and our central nervous system. Now, to round this out, there is a risk to exposing yourself to too much weight too often. A lot of people struggle with this. They go way too heavy, way too often. You run the risk of burnout, of injury. You run the risk of not being able to express your true strength. The example I'm gonna give here is actually the last block. So we were prepping, our program was going really, really well. We were prepping up for a 782 pull. But the week prior, I had deadlifted 727, and it was a bit hard, but really because I built up so much fatigue from all the heavy training I was doing, all the heavy volume I was doing. Going into the weekend, that didn't stop. Then going into the following week, the week I was supposed to hit that 782 pull, I didn't really pull back. In fact, I went even harder, especially when it came to squats. Unfortunately, this set me up for failure. I wasn't able to express my true strength. I couldn't even get 782 off the floor, let alone lock it out. Now, this isn't a strength issue. It was a fatigue issue. And we're going to talk about this in a second. But what you need to know as it relates to exposure is if you expose yourself to too heavy of loads too often, especially in the context of volume, you're just doing too much, this can put a massive governor, we'll call it, on your actual strength, your ability to express your strength. Okay, so we need to find a way to manage this properly. Of course, some of the other risks, like I said, injury, burnout, just overall regression. In order to avoid all of this, we just need proper periodization. Okay, so this just means making sure that you have a systematized strategic buildup and a strategic dosing, okay, when it comes to exposure. All right, so maybe week one is your secondary is a 3x5, your primary is a 1x1 with a 3x3 back down. I don't know, something like that, right? But the intensity slowly climbs week to week. And then after about 4 to 5 weeks, you pull that intensity back down and you slowly build up again. And this idea of slowly creating this upward trajectory of strength, okay? So it happens over time. So that's rule one, exposure. You need to train heavier if you want to get better at lifting heavier loads. Rule number two is fatigue, and fatigue kind of exists and operates on the other end of the spectrum as exposure, right? The both are really, really important, but as we talked about with exposure, the dose kind of makes the poison here, right? We need to make sure that yes, we are giving ourselves a reason to adapt, a reason to grow. We're giving ourselves the stress we need in order to create the adaptations we want, right? But at the same time, if we do too much, especially if we do too much too often, we can run into issues. So the idea is to manage our fatigue. This is probably one of the most important principles when it comes to intermediate and advanced lifters. You need to manage your fatigue because as you get stronger and stronger, it's gonna be harder and harder for you to recover. You're lifting heavier stuff, dude. You're just doing more. Not only that, but you've probably put on quite a bit of size. It takes more. It takes more to do more. So you just have to be cognizant of that, okay? Stress can suppress success if you let it. That's all fatigue is. It's just stress. Now, a lot of people think fatigue is your enemy, but it's not. Fatigue is actually your best friend. It's because of fatigue that we get stronger, that we get better. Accumulating fatigue actually leads to adaptations because, believe it or not, your body doesn't actually grow from the training session. It doesn't actually grow because you trained the muscle. It grows because your body recovered from the training. That recovery period, that space where your body has that break, that's where the growth is happening. The stress induces the reason to grow, right? It tells your body like, yo, we are not good enough yet. We need to get better. But guess what? Then you need that time to get better. And then the next training session, a little bit more stress, then recover, get better. Then a little bit more stress. And it's just ebb and flow. As you might imagine, though, it can be really difficult to manage that, especially on each individual basis because every person is different. Everybody responds to fatigue differently. Everybody responds to different styles and variables of training differently. You know what I mean? So it's just, my point is be smart, okay? The dose makes the poison here. We alluded to it in the earlier rule. You just have to make sure that you're dosing yourself properly when it comes to your training volume, training intensity, the frequency, all that stuff, okay? This just reiterates everything we said. Time to push, time to pull. There's a time to push really, really hard, and there's a time to pull back. Okay, I can tell you right now from personal experience, and I'll give you a story in a second once we round this out. If you do not learn how to pull back, you will not be your strongest self ever. This idea of constantly giving 110%, and by 110%, I mean pushing the limits of your body every single day, no. There is such a thing as overtraining, and anybody who tells you different has not trained hard enough. They don't understand, okay? Every movement is different. So what I mean here is that, and I'm gonna stick to the powerlifting context, squat, bench, and deadlift need to be treated as different and unique skills, unique movements. It's because they are. Each of us is better built for one versus the other, okay? That's just the truth of it. So what I want you guys to be cognizant of is just because you train squat a certain way and you give yourself a certain number of working sets at a certain amount of intensity and stuff per week doesn't mean you can do the same for deadlift and doesn't mean you should do the same for bench. And I'll use myself as an example. For bench, I can handle really high intensities multiple times per week, especially at lower volumes. Like I can touch like RP 8 to 9s, or I shouldn't even say that. I can touch over 90% multiple times per week and make progress there. In fact, it's the only way I make progress on benches, by lifting really, really heavy, really, really often. I just constantly need that stimulus. On deadlift, that would destroy me. In fact, on deadlift, I really can't handle more than 2 or 3 weeks of back-to-back really heavy pulls. The moment I start to accumulate tons of heavy training volume in my deadlift, everything tanks. My body's not well built for the deadlift, so it takes me a lot longer and a lot more resources to recover for deadlifts. Squats, somewhere in the middle. I can handle a decent amount of heavy training with squats, but even with squats, it gets to a point where it's too much, too often, we need to pull back. So just make sure you're treating each movement as such, okay? You want to approach every single movement that you're trying to build strength in as if it's isolated from everything else, okay? As if you're approaching something completely new for the first time. The last thing I'm going to say here, this is just like a little tip for you guys, especially for people who don't have a coach or aren't running a program or something like that. Let's say you want to test your maxes at the end of a week or something like that, or let's say 8 weeks from now or 4 weeks from now you want to test your maxes, whatever it is. Just make sure you're tapering into that, okay? What I mean by that is you're pulling back in some way, shape, or form. Usually it's volume that people pull back on and a little bit of intensity. Some people prefer to really pull back on everything. Some people like to keep everything the same, and I just don't think that that's smart. In my opinion, just make sure you're not doing as much or doing things as heavy as you normally would going into that session. Now, it doesn't have to happen 4 weeks out. You want it to be around maybe a week or two out. You're slowly tapering the training intensity and the training volume, okay? Because this will allow your body that extra room to recover and make sure that fatigue doesn't inhibit your strength, okay? It doesn't inhibit your ability to express maximum strength, okay? All right, cool. Let's move on to rule number 3. Time for rule number 3, but before we talk about it, I have to let you know that I've recently partnered with AYBL, AYBL. It's an awesome apparel brand, fitness apparel brand, athleisure, activewear, that whole thing, men's and women's line. In fact, the first 7 years of the company, they were crushing it in women's stuff. And then about 3 years ago, they started making men's stuff, and I really enjoy it. In fact, I'm wearing some of the sweats right now. I'll have to show you guys in a second, but really comfortable stuff. What I really like about it is it's very plain, it's very simple, and it's high quality stuff for not that high of a price tag. And if you are going to invest in some of the clothing, you can use Gavin10, Gavin 10, for, I think it's 10% off. And of course that does support me, so it really means a lot to me if you guys do use the code. If you are gonna buy, the run shorts are probably the best shorts. All right, let's talk about rule number 3. Rule number 3 is leverage. This one is super simple, super short. You've heard me talk about this before. This is technique. That's basically it. This is technique. I need you guys to get really good at learning your body. Why? Because in order to maximize our potential, maximize our performance, we have to optimize our technique, okay? Every single one of us is built differently, okay? In terms of our limb lengths and levers, our mass, how we hold our mass, how we move through space, we are all built differently. That's a beautiful thing. The downside is that means that when you apply someone else's technique to yourself, it's not going to map on perfectly. You need to make sure that you are optimizing your technique, and how you do this is by learning your body. What we want to do is combine efficiency with effectiveness, and then of course safety. Although safety, truthfully, I don't really care that much about. No, I'm only kidding. Being safe is very important. But it's really just these two that we need to focus on. Why? Because efficiency means minimum effort for maximum results. Okay, this is obvious. If you're trying to be as strong as humanly possible, what is the position I can get in? How can I fixate myself relative to the bar so that I can literally just have the straightest bar path possible? It could just be straight up and down, because we know that that's the most efficient path, right? That's the least amount of energy for the max result. Effectiveness, though, is what position do I need to be in so that I can produce maximum amounts of force. Now, you'll find that what would be super, super effective for you to produce insane amounts of force, exert all of this strength, is going to be slightly different than the position you would need to be in to be super, super efficient. So the goal is to kind of marry these two if you can. And what you'll find is a lot of powerlifters, especially natural powerlifters like myself, we kind of end up erring more on the side of efficiency. And that's why you see a lot of lifters who don't look like they have tons of muscle mass and stuff. They're lifting weights that are like, what the fuck? Like, how is this even possible? It's because they've completely maximized their efficiency as a lifter. You'll see this a lot of times with sumo deadlifters, right? Okay, we all know that deadlift, that lifter who can deadlift 800 something pounds but can't squat over 700, right? No shade, but that's because they've maximized their efficiency. They've maximized their limb lengths and their leverages so that they can lift the most amount of weight possible with what they have, which is whatever amount of muscle that they have. Obviously, safety, again, is really important, but if you're doing this, you'll probably end up in a position that's relatively safe. And it does get to a point where, I mean, how safe is it to load 760 plus pounds on your back during a squat? I mean, you tell me. You know, at some point, yep, there's an inherent risk that just can't be eliminated, and that's the price we pay, brother. So, all right, that's rule number 3. Rule number 4, seasons. This one's very simple as well. We kind of touched on this briefly when we were talking about exposure, and if you remember, I said one of the risks is injury, burnout, inability to actually express your true potential on the platform, and the solution to that is periodization. Well, this is pretty much what we're talking about here, except this is the bigger picture version of that, okay? So what we mean by seasons is there is a time to reap and a time to sow, okay? What I've found is a lot of lifters don't understand the importance of making sure every single training block or even micro/macro cycle serves a unique purpose. In other words, we need to have a phasic approach to training. Now, I'm making this sound really smart, nerdy, and complicated because I want to make myself look good. But really, this is very simple. All I mean here is make sure that every set of months that you're training, it should serve a purpose, right? You want to make sure that you're accomplishing a very specific goal. And the training that you design, the system, if you're working with me, we're going to sit down, we're going to design a game plan that reflects the goal, right? Because again, we're looking for a specific adaptation. Now, the trick here is you can't try to do everything at the same time. You're just going to keep running in circles. You're probably going to get hurt. You're not going to make much progress, all right? It's just, you're going to be really average at everything at best. So instead, we hyper-focus, we isolate, we make sure that, okay, this is the goal I'm going to work on now so that I can build this foundation and work on the next goal then when it makes sense to do so, right? That was a really shitty way of wording that, but hopefully you get what I'm saying. So an example of the phasic approach to training might be having a hypertrophy or volume phase in which you're really trying to build lots of muscle tissue / work on your work capacity, right? Condition yourself, okay? Then you might have a strength phase where, yeah, you're working with a lower rep count. You're working in that 3 to 5 range, right? And it's heavier loads at 75 to 90% of your 1RM, right? And it's hard training volume. And then after a strength phase, maybe you go into your peaking phase, right? And this is pretty normal, right? This is usually the ebb and flow of it. Your peaking phase is designed to make sure that you are fully prepared to lift maximum amounts of loads for 1 rep in a given movement, right? Because it's very different when you are trying to build strength versus peak your strength, or you're trying to actualize, if that's even a word, you're trying to actualize the strength that you've built. Okay, you need to, again, understand that strength is a skill. Your body has to get really, really good at producing maximum amounts of force in the movement for 1 rep. That's different than being able to tolerate heavier loads for 3 sets of 5, right? That's building the base, but now we need to peak our strength. We need to, again, express our strength. And like we said before, there's other variables at play we need to be cognizant of. The fatigue, right? The exposure and finding that balance. My point is there are seasons, there are phases to our training. If we try to build tons and tons of muscle, so a hypertrophy phase, while also building tons and tons of strength, while also trying to maximize our strength, peak, right? I mean, you're just gonna end up in a shitstorm of brokenness. There's just no way that you're gonna be able to successfully create adaptations in all of those areas at the same time. You're not a machine, okay? So that's all we mean here. And the last example I'm gonna give you here is think about mathematics, okay? In math, if you were to skip everything before calculus or differential equations and go straight to calc, right? Not only would you have no idea what the fuck is going on, but it would essentially render any of the work that you're doing in calculus useless. It'd be completely unproductive because you don't understand anything. You're not ready for it yet. You haven't built the foundation for it. If instead you go unit by unit, now all of a sudden you're building momentum. You're building a foundation. You're building and acquiring all of the tools and assets you need to then apply it later on so that you can actually make use of the calculus class. You understand what I'm saying? So why would strength be any different? We want to build momentum, okay? Every training block serves a purpose. Every training cycle serves a purpose. Really, every training year serves a purpose, right? And the idea is to slowly let everything build on top of each other. Build the foundation. And actually, a really good example of this, I am blanking on the guy's name. I think his name is Cal something, Cal Dietz or Cal something. He came up with a triphasic approach to training mainly for mainstream athletes, soccer players, football players, those types of athletes. And the idea is, I believe it's, there's a concentric focus, there is is it an isometric focus and then an eccentric, I want to say? Is that right? I don't remember. But long story short, there's phases. So you work on each specific goal in each phase. So in one phase, you're focusing on the eccentrics. In one phase, you're focusing on what I want to say is like static holds, essentially. Then the next phase is just purely concentric power. Like, that's the idea. We're creating phases to our training where we are working on specific things at specific times so that we can create forward momentum, build foundation for greater success. That's essentially it, okay? That's rule number 4. Okay, final rule, rule number 5, guys. This rule is something that I don't really hear anyone talk about ever. And it's frustrating because if people talked about it when I was younger, I would have won an open world championship by now. For those of you who don't know, I've won a junior world championship, but I've competed in 2 open world championships so far, and I've lost both. I can confidently say that this rule, if you apply this virtually in any area of your life, you will create success. People will respect you, people will admire you, and you will inspire them to be greater and to be better, period. So pay attention. Rule number 5 is to think. I need you guys to think. Intentionally think. Think more now so you can think less later. And I'm going to explain what I mean by this. Training is your time to prepare. Game day is your time to perform. The two are very different. I'm going to quote Seneca here. I believe it was Seneca who said this. We do not rise to the level of our expectations. We fall to the level of our training. That is extremely true. It's scary because it's true. I've experienced it. I've lived it firsthand. There are 2 things we need to prepare, the physical and the mental. We'll talk about the physical first. What I want you to do is when you are training, especially as a strength athlete, leave no stone unturned. If you find that there's this weird misgroove happening with your squat, where your hips shoot up first out of the hole, I promise you, it's not going to go away. It won't just be there on meet day, right? That's like a common joke phrase that us powerlifters like to say, oh, well, it'll be there meet day. It won't, I'm telling you. Because exactly how you prepare is exactly how you'll perform. So address it. Address it now. Address it ASAP. No matter how annoying it is, I don't care if you have to take the bar with 1 yellow or 1 red and do 1,000 reps of it every single day. I've done, not 1,000 reps, but I have done that before going into meets every single day to practice this one cue, this one technique to work something out. In fact, I'm going to give you guys a story in a second. If that's what is required of you, then that's what you do. Because in order to get stronger, you have to understand no one else can do this work for you. This is not a team sport, guys. It's a very lonely sport. It is your job to execute. Your job alone. So take it fucking seriously. It won't be there meet day. Address it, no matter what it is. Now let's talk about the mental. The mental, this is the part that nobody likes to talk about. And it blows my mind. I don't understand how people can, our brain is everything, and yet we never talk about it. I can tell you right now that working on my mindset was the biggest most advantageous shift I ever made in my life. And it was going into NAPFs. I started actually taking my mindset extremely seriously, taking my spirituality extremely seriously. And I don't think it's a coincidence that as soon as I did that, I broke 900 kilos, was the first 93 to do that in the IPF. Finally set a squat world record and continued to progress since then. And now I'm on track to continue to progress. And obviously we're competing for world titles and we're competing for records and all of that stuff. And this is just this is the level that we operate at. But in order to do that, it's the mindset, man. And so what I want you guys to start doing in your training, start being intentional, writing down, journaling, literally, the mental cues, the music you listen to, the podcasts you're listening to, the quotes you read. I need you to start documenting it all, no different than you would your training. Would you write down your training numbers? When your coach gives you a spreadsheet, I use a training app because we're a little bit more advanced. We have a whole back-end system. I'm not going to get into it here. This is not a sales pitch, but I make sure my athletes leave notes. I make sure my athletes put in their weights. I make sure we track all of that stuff because I think data is extremely useful. Why wouldn't you do that for your mindset? Why wouldn't you do that for what motivates you? Why wouldn't you do that if you have a fear when it comes to really heavy squats and you find a workaround, which you have to because we leave no stone unturned. We have to address it, right? We're going to think more now so we can think less later. Why not take notes on that? When I go to meets, guys, I have a literal piece of loose leaf with tons of shit written on it. Stuff that's just meant to remind me of certain things, whether it be cues, whether it be just mental notes, things about my training philosophy. One of the exercises I work on with clients who are open to it is because I have my own mindset map that I've developed. There's a whole system for it. There's a bunch of different steps. I think I'm probably one of the first powerlifting coaches or strength coaches, I should say. I specialize in strength and hypertrophy, but as you might imagine, a lot of athletes who come to me are looking for powerlifting in particular. I'd say I'm one of the first coaches to really implement this into my coaching. I don't push it on athletes because it's not for everyone, but for those who want it, I give it to them. I've developed this whole system. And it goes way beyond powerlifting. We work on career, we work on your relationship, we work on all of that stuff. It's really like a mindset mentorship. But one of the things that we work on is the development of your own training philosophy. For those of you who don't know, in 2021, I wrote a training philosophy ebook. It's completely free. You can download it in the link at the link in the description. Completely free. I've had thousands of downloads. People have told me that it's, I don't believe them, but they said it had the impact on them similar to what David Goggins and Jocko Willink's books have had the impact on them as. And that's crazy to me. I don't know if I believe that. And I'm actually in the process of updating it. My point is I took the time to write down what my training philosophy is. What do I believe in? What motivates me? What drives me? Why do I do what I do? What do I believe? Who am I? Who is Gavin Eden? I took the time to write that down, and it wasn't for you guys. It was for me to remind myself. It just so happened that I started to realize, like, shit, I mean, I'm putting all this time and energy into it. Why not just make it available to people? Maybe they can get something from it. And I'm glad that I did that. So I want you to have that for yourself because it'll serve as a reminder. It'll serve as core fundamental pillars of who you are. That way you never truly get lost. And if you do lose your way, you can find your way back. All right. Now, the reason why we put all the work in is so that eventually we can stop thinking. Because I can tell you right now, on game day, the last thing you want to do is start questioning yourself. The last thing you want to do is start doubting yourself. The last thing you want to do is start hesitating. Preparation expels doubt, period. Trust the training. Confidence is built there, okay? And so if you want to perform your best, you have to remove all the interference. And the interference, a lot of it is fear. A lot of that fear comes from a lack of preparation, right? So in order to stop thinking, which by the way, allows you to live in the present, to be in the present moment. You're not thinking 5 minutes ahead, 5 moments ahead. You're not thinking about the past and all this shit. No, you're here, you're present. You enter this, what we call flow state as an athlete. You're just who you are. You're just having fun at this point, right? You've unlocked your body. You've unleashed your potential. In order to do that, you have to break the chains, and you break the chains by you just stop thinking. But here's the thing. If you never worked on any of this stuff, if you don't think more now, put in the work now, pay attention now, then when you do this, you won't be ready. You just won't. Because like I said, we're not going to rise to the level of our expectations. We're going to fall to the level of our training. It's that simple. Okay, so that's rule number 5, guys. Again, I really appreciate you guys sticking around and watching this video. If this was of value, please consider subscribing and liking this video. Let me know in the comments some topics that you'd like me to cover. More educational stuff is on the way. Really excited to get the production quality ramped up again as well. Before we close out, I want to share a client win because I'm so fired up about it. I started working with Timothy Webster. Really cool kid, young kid. I really believe in him. Started working with him in August. We are now about a month or 2 into our training together. When we first started, he said he wanted to lose weight and build strength essentially, but he has his dreams of becoming a world champion lifter, world champion power lifter. And within 1 month, he's lost 8 pounds, okay, which is great. Not only has he lost 8 pounds in just 1 month, but before working with me, he had never touched 360 pounds on high bar. After 1 month, he hit an AMRAP of 12 reps with 360 pounds on high bar while losing weight. So, and by the way, working a full-time job, and now he's a student as well. So he's under a lot, and yet somehow we found a way to do this. Now, I'm not giving myself the credit. I'm giving the credit to these 5 rules. We developed a game plan, a battle system that would work for him. And guys, it's not always gonna be perfect, but that's why we collaborate. That's why we communicate. The idea is to work together on a vision, a goal that we're aligned with or aligned on, all right? So I just had to share that client win because I thought that was pretty cool. So anyway, appreciate you guys watching, and I will see you in the next YouTube video. Peace.